Hello and welcome to our presentation today. We have a guest speak to us, Lieutenant General Anthony Cotton, who will talk about Air Force Global Strike Command's role in the changing strategic landscape, maintaining our competitive edge in global power competition. I'd like to thank our sponsors for today's meeting, which include the Sam Nunn School of International Affairs, the Center for International Strategy, Technology, and Policy, and the Nuclear and Radiological Engineering program within the Woodruff School here at Georgia Tech. We do welcome General Cotton. He is currently the Deputy Commander of the Air Force Global Strike Command and within the U.S. Strategic Command at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Hopefully he'll steer clear of our incoming Delta hurricane that looks to be threatening the Louisiana coast there. So that's upcoming this week, full of excitement. Within his command, they basically focus on strategic deterrence, global strike capability, and combat support to STRATCOM and other geographic combatant commands. Lieutenant General Cotton entered the Air Force through the ROTC program when he was enrolled at the bachelor's degree level at North Carolina State University in Raleigh. Since then, he's held a number of positions, again, working his way up to Lieutenant General here within the, again, Global Strike Command. So with that, I would like to pass on some notes to our audience regarding this presentation. We are scheduled to have over 100 people participating in today's meeting. And as a result, we'd ask that you use the Q&A chat session within this interface, and we can provide those comments to General Cotton at the end of his presentation. If you see any questions that you particularly like and you'd like to elevate their importance to make sure they're good asked, please use the like feature within that chat function. And within that, I'd like to welcome General Cotton and look forward to hearing what you say. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Wargaming. As you said, as a member of the Atlantic Coast Conference, it's pretty neat to be able to speak to folks from Georgia Tech. So I hope you enjoy the presentation, and please ask any questions that you might have. So, but I will have to say, sorry, Rambling Wreck, but from my perspective, go Wolfpack. What I'd like to do is spend a couple of minutes talking about Global Strike Command, and I think it's very pertinent that we talk about it in this time that we're facing here as the United States, and just what we're seeing globally in the world. So if we can go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about where we think we are as a department and as an Air Force, and more particular as Global Strike Command. So there's been a fundamental shift from our perspective in what we see in the military and in our Air Force that really plays to our strengths at Global Strike Command. So you'll see a lot of acronyms. What I'll try to do is I'll try to capture those acronyms and mention them once so you'll know what they are. But the national security strategy it talks about a growing political, economic, and military competitions that we're facing in the United States. So when you talk about the National Defense Strategy, which is the NDS, what we see is a reemergence of what we see as long-term strategic competition. The Nuclear Posture Review talks about great power competition. The National Military Strategy talks about increasing complexity in a global environment that's rapidly changing, and what we're seeing is a profound change. So what don't you see in this chart as far as the transition of what we're seeing here in the Department of Defense and what our country is seeing writ large? What you don't really see is, next slide, please. The past context of where we were and what we're encountering now. So what you didn't see in the previous chart is you didn't see counterterrorism, You didn't see violent extremism. What you saw is now we're at a point in time where we're having great power competition with adversarial powers that are near peers. What you didn't see is how do we continue to work with static force presence. What you're seeing now is how are we going to employ dynamic force employment. What you didn't see is change when necessary, where now we must be able to change at a moment's notice. What you didn't see is we're in an environment of which we as the United States have sanctuary. Our current context is just the opposite. We have lost sanctuary. What you didn't see is documents that talk about the freedom of movement that we once was able to have with impunity. No longer the case. Past context, and we'll talk a little bit about this as we talk about the assets that we control, is aging and old equipment. Being able to ask for more resources as opposed to living with what we have. So we've endured a fundamental shift. And like I said, that context of where we were and where we are is changing. You know, one of the things that my boss, General Timothy Ray, commander of Global Strike Command, would say is, you know, in the past, we've had galvanizing events that kind of link us and unite us as a people in our country. If you think about Pearl Harbor, if you think about the Cuban Missile Crisis, most recently, if you think about 9/11. After the Cold War, though, one of the things that we have noticed is that conversation about deterrence, nuclear deterrence, what we like to call strategic deterrence because it's more than nuclear. That conversation kind of left the vocabulary of a lot of people. Why is that? Because 9/11 drove us to a requirement to make sure that we understood and countered the terrorism threat. Very understandable. Not poking at that at all. It was something that we had to do as a nation and we had to do as a department. But it did kind of disconnect us from the discussion to talk about strategic operations at a strategic level, thinking about strategic peers and contemporaries. Counterterrorism is probably a little more politically and strategically easy to deal with. It's easy to understand because you can kind of see that enemy when you think about a watershed event that might happen with a terrorist threat. But what happens when you have to think about something at the more strategic level, when you're really thinking about great power competition? So I think as folks that are in the Sam Nunn School, folks that are in ROTC detachments throughout the country, men and women who are just doing their daily lives and dealing with the situations that we're dealing with now, COVID-19, et cetera. The conversation of understanding that there's a great power competition it isn't one that just easily flows off the tongue. But in venues like this, it gives us an opportunity to be able to have those discussions and talk about those. So if we go to the next slide. So how do we respond? You know, there's conversations about strategic deterrence. I think unilaterally drawing down our nuclear capabilities is probably not the answer. And why do I say that? Let's just look at this chart. Look at what's happening to what we would consider our adversaries, near peer adversaries that we're dealing with in our great power competition today. And you can see the chart. It's China and it's Russia. So how do we do that? Replacing aging systems with modernization programs within our portfolio is absolutely required. And what we're talking about here is not growing our portfolio, but it's getting a new portfolio, modernizing systems. And when I talk to you a little bit later about our weapon systems, you'll see why, as most of them are just as old as I am. But it's a one-for-one replacement. So it's not that conversation on having a arms race. It's not that at all. What we're really talking about is something that our great power competition adversaries have already begun and are doing. And what we mean by that is the modernization of their programs to be in parity with us, the United States. That's something that's worth a conversation, and that's something that we want to be able to share with you. Let's go ahead to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're talking about. So if you look at this chart, this is our bread and butter of what we do. Long range strike is what Air Force Global Strike does. Our mission set is one that we own. And what I mean by we own, the United States. Our allies do not own bombers. We are the bomber force for our allies. Our allies do not own intercontinental ballistic missiles. We are the umbrella for our allies when it comes to ICBMs. 2 of the 3 legs of the triad belongs to Air Force Global Strike Command, as we report to the combatant commander and provide capabilities to the combatant commander known as U.S. Strategic Command in Offutt in Omaha, Nebraska. But look at this chart. What you'll find in these news articles is pretty interesting. So first of all, COVID-19, and we'll talk a little bit about COVID-19. All of the things that you're seeing on this chart, all of those headlines was done, all of those missions were done during COVID-19. It's being done currently. But what should be even more striking to you is our ability to project power during COVID crisis. But the headlines of all of these articles that you're looking at right now are from foreign news agencies. It's from the foreign press. But what we're able to do is we're able to let our coalition partners and allies and adversaries alike understand that we can still accomplish our mission. And we did that. Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit about projecting power during COVID. You know, when it was clear that COVID was moving across the globe, we in Global Strike Command want to get in front of it. We prepare for what potentially could happen, what will happen, and what steps we needed to take to ensure that we could actually operate through any contingency that was brought our way. So in February of this year, we actually had tabletop exercises to really get after what would happen if COVID was crossed into our shores, as we all know it has. So we were able to kind of get in front of it, and it showed what we did in the previous chart. But in this chart, what it shows is we were still able and are still able to project power for the United States of America. We did not miss a beat in being able to continue to project power in a safe, secure method. So I, as a deputy commander of Global Strike Command, was really pleased to see the work that our commanders, lower level commanders, did to prepare our men and women to fight through in a COVID-19 environment, and been able to still ensure our allies that we're there is really, really important, especially during this time that we're dealing with. From the ICBM side of the house, we're still pulling 24/7, 365 days of alerts. The Minuteman III weapon system is still highly reliable, and its on alert status is at an all-time high, even through the COVID environment, with the activities that our men and women were able to do to create a bubble around themselves to keep themselves from being affected by the COVID virus. Hats off to each and every one of them for being able to do that kind of work. We found that teleworking, I wish I could be in Atlanta right now in person at the Sam Nunn School to talk to you, but through teleworking, through Zoom, through Blue Jeans, through Microsoft Teams, we're still able to reach out and have conversations, not only with folks like you, which is incredible to be able to have this conversation through this venue, but also, I mean, I think I had 2 meetings this morning, through VTCs or through Zoom or Microsoft Teams, utilizing conversations and meetings that I can still have with the Pentagon or with our forces throughout the world. So it didn't slow us down. And what it also probably has done for us, it's given us a new ability because of a new capability that was probably always there, but we didn't take advantage. So it's something that's probably not going to go away, even as we work through COVID. It's probably something that we're going to always keep in our toolkit to be able to use, because what we're finding is some great benefit in being able to use this venue to get messages and have meetings and to make decisions and kind of flatten some decision space on some of the things that we're doing. So it's really working out to our benefit. Now I know my staff, I'm actually pretty proficient in using Zoom and using the capabilities here, but our staff is, man, they're really good in being able to get this type of work done for all of us. So it just makes it something that really is beneficial. And like I said, if we think about what positive, if there is anything that we can say that's positive about COVID-19, it's being able to kind of see what kind of work we can do in an isolated environment when you have to telework. So it's proven beneficial for us to be able to understand the capabilities that are there. Can we go to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're responsible for at Air Force Global Strike Command. So here are our weapon systems. So when we talk about a snapshot of who we are, I already mentioned that we control 2/3 of the nuclear triad. So the bomber force and the ICBM Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Force falls under our portfolio. So once again, I can't foot stomp this enough. We own all the bombers in the United States. And you heard me say earlier, and this is important, we are the bomber force for our allies and partners. We are the bomber force. And from left to right, going down, you can see from the bombers, our venerable B-52. Just did a mission on it not too long ago. What an incredible airplane. It gets a bad rap from my perspective on people talking about its age with tail numbers that are 1960 and 1961. A lot of legs are left on that airplane. A very potent weapon system for our nation. Below that is the B-2 Spirit, our stealth bomber that's based out of Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. And then below that is the Bone, the B-1 Lancer, which is based out of Dyess Air Force Base in Texas, as well as Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. It is a conventional mission only bomber. It is not a nuclear capable bomber in our force. In the middle of the screen, you see 2 crew members, intercontinental ballistic missile crew members. If you look, you'll see that I'm wearing a missile badge. I am a missileer and a space operator by trade. Started my life in Minot, North Dakota, with the 91st Missile Wing. We have three ICBM units in the northern tier of the United States. I just mentioned the one in Minot, North Dakota. We have one in Great Falls, Montana, and we have one in Francis E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, are our three missile wings. When we talk about security for the ICBM forces, we have overflight forces as well as ground forces that maintain security of our ICB units. The venerable UH-1 and Huey that dates itself back to the Vietnam era, and we'll talk about its replacement here in subsequent slides, currently do that mission for us in the missile fields in the northern tier. Off to the right side, you'll see the National Airborne Operations Center. I've seen some news clips on that. I think some people call it the Doomsday aircraft. It is a 747 variant. We call it the E-4B. It's a survivable mobile command post that has command authority for the President of the United States to make sure he always has comms with his fielded forces at any time, day or night, in the worst situations that could possibly happen to our nation. The NAOC is there to provide that comm linkage for the President of the United States. We're also the lead command for the Nuclear Command and Control and Communications, known as NC3. Those are the systems that we use to make sure that our fielded nuclear forces have C2 24/7, 365 days, and we're the lead command for that. An intricate web of communication systems that traverse across the United States, whether it's through ground or whether it's airborne satellite systems, you name it, but a constant linkage to the command authorities of our country. And we're the lead command for the nation to ensure that those NC3 systems are properly fielded and properly acquired. I'll go to the next chart. So one of the things that we have to do here as Global Strike Command is we have to sustain the old until the new arrive. The good news is our portfolio is full of acquisition systems that will replace the old systems that I previously mentioned. So eventually the B-21 Raider bomber will replace both the B-1 and the B-2 fleets that I mentioned earlier. The ground-based strategic deterrent system, we're still waiting to give her a name, will replace the Minuteman III as our premier ICBM platform. I talked a little bit about the Vietnam era UH-1N helicopter. We have acquired a replacement for that helicopter known as the MH-139. And for our outcomes, our air-launched cruise missiles, that will be replaced by what is known as the long-range strategic system that is en route, that will replace the outcome systems that are on our bomber fleets currently. We're also, you remember I talked about our old gal, the Buff. We're also in the midst of re-engining, getting ready to re-engine the B-52 bomber to have it sustained through the 2050s, as well as some other systems that will be modernized within that platform. So as you look at our portfolio, we're pretty happy to see that everything is laying flat, if you will, as far as new sustainment and modernization. If you walk back to when I opened up our conversation, when we talk about great power competition and the work that was done by our by China and Russia, you can see that we're doing the same as far as making sure that we can modernize our systems as well. And I'm happy to say that so far everything, knocking on wood, our acquisition programs are in pretty good shape as we move forward. But once again, I like the foot stomp. We provide the ICBM Overwatch and umbrella for our allies. We provide the bomber forces for our allies and partners. So really, really important from our vantage point and from our perspective. Next chart, please. So from General Ray's perspective as a commander of Global Strike Command and the Joint Forces Air Component Command to STRATCOM, there are three key focus areas that we pay a lot of attention to all the time. That's excellence, teams, and people. So it can give you kind of a easy understanding that I'll start at the middle. Teams are driven by incredible people. Those incredible people that make incredible teams, by definition, drives excellence. And that's what we're looking for within Global Strike Command, and that's what we're seeing. As citizens of the United States, you should be proud to know the strikers that are in your midst, that are wearing the uniform every single day, carrying out this incredible mission. I've been in the Air Force almost 35 years. I'm not worried. I can sleep at night knowing that the young men and women that are part of this team that will carry on the legacy of what we do here at Air Force Global Strike Command and what we do to protect this great nation is in good hands, because I get to see it every single day, whether they're wearing a uniform, whether they're wearing a polo shirt, whether they're wearing a bag of what we call flight suits, or whether they're wearing OCPs of what I'm wearing now. Support personnel, operational personnel, all of them. And it's about culture, and it's about understanding the culture that they're in and what they bring to the fight, and what they're proud of, and how they can wake up every day and feel comfortable in what they're doing. And it is just amazing to see. And I will tell you, that was another thing that I think General Ray would also have no problem telling you, is even through the COVID crisis, to be able to see what what these young men and women do every single day. Our airmen are just absolutely incredible on the missions that they're still able to continue to provide as far as defending our nation. So it's all about taking care of the people and ensuring that we set them up for success and having incredible teams that drives excellence within our command. So next slide. So kind of to wrap this up a little bit for you, and then we'll go into Q&As. One of the things that I think it's really, really important for you to understand as far as the missions of Global Strike Command. Global Strike Command makes up the land and the air component of the nation's triad. We own all of the bombers, the B-2 and the B-52 that are new capable bombers, and all of the Minuteman III ICBM systems. The other leg, of course, the sea leg, is owned by the United States Navy. We're the lead command for nuclear command, control, and communication. But even more than that, we do strategic deterrence every single day. Whether it's the men and women that are on alert, or whether it's the conventional missions that I opened up with, that our bomber force and the Mighty 8th Air Force are doing every single day, to be able to present and show forces forward, and be able to show our allies and partners that we're there with them, and being able to have incredible opportunities to train with our coalition partners and our allies, even in the midst of COVID, is something that we do without batting an eye. And you should be rest assured that I can make that statement as easily as I can, knowing that the men and women that are part of this command can do that work for this nation all the time, are doing that work even while I'm on this Blue Jeans call with you, that they're doing that mission right now. So with that, Steve, what I like to do is one more chart. So that's what makes us lethal. We talked about the iron. We talked about the weapon systems. But what really makes us lethal are the men and women that you're seeing on it every single day. And like I said, they have families at home. They have kids that are going to schools. They have grandparents. They have mothers and fathers that they're dealing with as well, that are dealing with what the nation's dealing with as we go through the COVID crisis. And they are still bringing it home every single day when it's time for them to do the mission of Air Force Global Strike Command. So hopefully, Steve, that will stem some questions from the audience. But that's your Global Strike Command.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. That's very enlightening, and we appreciate the work that you do. I do believe that there are a number of questions that are online, and I'll pass this over to Chris to handle the Q&A.
Thanks, General. This has been great. So we do have several questions coming through now. So we'll start with the most likes. So first being, this is from Bobby O'Keefe. What has Air Force Global Strike Command observed being the pros and cons of Space Force establishment, and what is the command doing to adjust? How does the new service change joint operations and C2 concerning our national strategic assets?
Yeah, so what makes, great question, by the way. So what makes this really work for us is it's pretty transparent. The good news is, as part of the Department of the Air Force, that relationship did not, we didn't see a seam come across as we saw the Space Force come about. So the relationship that we have, you saw in some of the NC3 components, it's a space component. We have a relationship. I have dialogue with the deputy commander of the Space Force. So I'm a space guy as well. So I have those personal relationships with all the senior leadership that's in the Space Force. That prior to that was Air Force Space Command, which I was also a member of previously. So as far as what Space Force is bringing to us in a joint capabilities, none of that has changed, to be frank. What is good from their perspective is now they can be seen as that supported command, as opposed to being a supporting command, right? That was something that would kind of came to light as far as it becoming a separate service. From our perspective, though, Global Strike Command, that relationship has not changed. Now, as the air component to the U.S. Strategic Command, we actually, General Ray as the Joint Forces Air Component Commander, and I as the Deputy Joint Forces Air Component Commander, we actually, on behalf of the Space Force, can present forces to the commander of STRATCOM. So we have a relationship right now that we have as a coordinating authority for space with STRATCOM. So a long answer, but the reality is we didn't see any seam become evident because of the establishment of the Space Force. That relationship has stayed the same, and to be frank, I think will actually grow as the Space Force becomes even more mature.
Great, thank you, General. We have another one here from Matt Silos. What are some non-traditional ways Global Strike Command is competing short of armed conflict in phase 0, which is pre-war, so that we don't go to war with a peer competitor? How important is the joint force and allies in your efforts?
Matt, great question, and very important. So, I mean, I think I foot stomped this throughout, so COVID could have been something that could have turned nasty for us as far as being able to show our allies and partners that we're still in to provide assurances. That didn't happen. So let me just give you an example of what we're able to do from being able to still continue to have joint missions and exercises with our allies and partners. Right, we were still able to do that. We're still able to do that with our bomber task forces today, to be able to have what we call CONUS to CONUS missions. We can actually take off from a base here in the United States, fly missions with our allies and partners, either in Europe or in the Pacific, and then actually fly back home, and do that with no issues. And we've actually exercised that. We actually do it, and those were the charts that you saw with a lot of the news pictures and the headlines that you saw from foreign news sources as well. That is really important for us. I think it's always good for adversaries to understand that we're always ready, right? So part of strategic deterrence is for your adversary to understand that you have the capability and the will, and that prevents from my perspective, that prevents us from having to engage with the adversary, right? So I think those are a couple examples of what we've done, if you will, in phase 0, as Matt described it, to make sure that we're doing those type of things. There's also constant engagements that we have. So you're going to continue to have engagements with folks. And what I mean by that is just conversations with folks. We're still going to want to have venues where people can have conversations and discuss what's going on in the world, just like we're doing right here, right? So I'm pretty sure that we're putting this on YouTube. I'm pretty sure that adversaries will probably log in on YouTube and see what Lieutenant General Cotton has to say about his capabilities that he has at Global Strike Command. That's actually okay. I'd love that to happen. I want them to be able to see that, to understand what we're bringing to the fight. Hopefully that answers the question, Matt.
Thank you, sir. This next one's from Brian Stewart, and he asks, how do we use the diplomatic and informational aspects of DIME to complement modernizing our strategic force without being seen as escalatory?
So, I think that's one of the things I was talking about. I think diplomacy, part of strategic deterrence is, I don't want to have to engage with the adversary. I want to do everything, short of, ever having to engage, in a skirmish, if you will. So I think when we think about diplomacy in that regard, that's really, really key, right? But we also need to understand from, when we think about how we're going to react from the Department of Defense's perspective, in relation to what we're hearing and seeing from the State Department, I think all of that is a collaborative effort to make sure that all aspects of government are kind of harmonious in figuring out how we get after a set or known problem. So I think that relationship and that collaboration is key.
Thanks, sir. So this is from Adam Stolberg. How do we reconcile theory/pursuit of victory as implemented by the U.S. Air Force Global Strike Command with prospects for strategic stability vis-a-vis Russia and China? What are some of the criteria we are using to avoid inadvertent escalation?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I think it still goes back to some of the things that we were talking about before. So when we have, you know, we really prescribe to understand what's happening in a theater. So my boss has, and the commander of Stratcom, we really prescribe to understand where the commander of Indo-PACOM or the air component PACAF, where their heads are at, and what type of engagements do they want us to pursue. The same can be said when you're in European Command or the air component there, the United States Air Forces in Europe, on what type of engagements do you want us to have. You remember I was talking a little bit about the CONUS to CONUS or bomber task forces that you can bring to those regions. They understand the dynamics of what's going there. And you remember I also mentioned the collaboration efforts that we're having with the other aspects of the federal government to ensure that, you know, we're not going to do something that's going to drive the adversary to do something that we don't want them to do.
Great. This next one is from Stefano Terlizzi. What is your opinion about the role of hypersonic weapons in strategic stability?
Yeah, so I think hypersonics our adversaries are already producing them. I think I just read an article here this morning about Russia using a scramjet and deploying it out of I think it was a tube in one of their subs. So that is happening now. We're working hypersonics as well. Our bomber forces will have the capability of carrying hypersonics. So I think it's a weapon that we'll see that will be deployed on some of our bomber forces in the future. So what was the second part of that question though? He was talking. What was the question about stability?
Yeah, it was your opinion on the role of hypersonic weapons on strategic stability.
Yeah, I don't think there's a devolution of stability. I think it's just probably an evolution of weaponry that will be available.
Great. This next one is from Andrew Sherman. How does the Afgsc cooperate with allied nuclear powers, present a unified and diverse deterrence to competing powers?
So if you're asking from the MAGCOM perspective on how we have, direct engagements, I would tell you that that's not something that we would do. That's something that's, that would happen at higher levels, right? So now when asked upon, the commander of Global Strike Command can make some engagements on behalf of maybe the Secretary of Defense, but as a MAGCOM writ large, we would not necessarily just go off and do that without, once again, some collaborative efforts that we're seeing with the other pieces of the DIME effort within the federal government. All of that has to work in concert, because all of that, when it comes to a conversation that General Ray or myself would have with the commander of European Command or the commander of Indo-PACOM, all of that has to have in concert because we want to be able to message appropriately on behalf of the nation and on behalf of those commanders that are there in theater.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. This next question is from Zach Edix, and he asks, how is the Air Force protecting modern technologies like GPS and sensitive electronics from modern threats like air-to-space missiles and EMPs?
Yeah, so a lot of work is going into that. So from the U.S., I'll let U.S. Space Force person answer that question in a different venue because I'm a customer to GPS. So probably more appropriate for someone else to answer that question in regards to GPS. We EMP harden a lot of our weapon systems that we have within Global Strike currently today. So we monitor our weapon systems from that perspective. As a strategic deterrent force, it's something that's part of our heritage that dates back to the Strategic Air Command days in that regard. So I think I'll punt on the GPS and what space is what they're doing in that regard, but I can talk about, and I have, what we're doing on our system.
Thank you, sir. So this next question is from Joel Cowan, and they ask, what is the role in the future of drones and pilotless aircraft?
So from our perspective, I think there's some things that we can do, and we're looking at on how you can offset security and potentially have drones do some security things for us. So we're looking at that. I think there's an opportunity there. I think there's an opportunity for sustainment. So this is probably different than the answer that he was thinking about. But if you we really want to think about this in an innovative light, I talked about. I'll give you an example. I talked a little bit about our ICBM forces. One of the things about our ICBM forces that are in the northern tier, they're in the northern tier for a reason. So it's pretty vast terrain up there. When I was the commander of Malmstrom Air Force Base in Great Falls, Montana, it could take 3 hours to drive to the furthest site from the base itself. Wouldn't it be kind of neat if we can have some kind of innovation, innovative ideas to kind of figure out how do you do sustainment? How do you make it so instead of traveling over the roads and it's a 3 hour delivery to get out to the missile field, whether it's commodities for the airmen that's out there or a broken part, wouldn't it be kind of neat to kind of figure out if there's ways that you can cut that timeline in half by maybe having drones doing that? So we want to kind of think outside the box on a lot of those things. We have a long ways to go. Don't get me wrong. We're not Amazon, but I will tell you, when you saw that, you start thinking, well, hey, look how they're delivering packages. Why can't, is there something that we might be able to do as well? So I took a different twist on, because UASs, we use that in the inventory today in the United States Air Force. So we'll continue to do that. But I think by taking a different look at what we're doing with some of that technology and how that can help the airmen and help us with sustainability is yet another way that a lot of the men and women within Global Strike Command, they come up with these pretty neat ideas on how to take some of the technologies that we're seeing today in the commercial world and translating that over to, and I won't even say military application, but what I'll say is more of a way to help us with sustainment.
Great. Thank you, sir. This next question comes from Ian Harrison. As the U.S. military finds itself in a position of no longer having undisputed overmatch over our adversaries and is simply at parity with them, does that change the decision-making process for ordering a strike?
Wow. So you remember we were talking about how do we have this understanding of it's not a counterterrorism fight, and that now we're dealing with great power competition and near peers. I think from our perspective, it doesn't change the calculus and how you do things, because I'm very confident in saying that it's still the most powerful. We are still the most powerful Air Force, on the face of the planet. That the United States Navy is the most powerful Navy on the face of the planet. I'm still very confident in saying that. What we are doing, though, and it's, it will take folks like the ROTC cadets that you're having there, right there at Georgia Tech as well. Since I was a former Air University commander in charge of all ROTC, it's really how do you get people to get out of or think differently to include the civilian sector, to kind of think differently about great power competition as opposed to something that is more of a violent extremist organization type of construct. I think, and a nun school is a perfect venue for that. How do you think strategically when it's something that you're thinking that's a nation state as opposed to a small group or organization that you're fending for, right? So having that kind of conversation, even with our youngest members in the military, is really, really important, right? To really think about it from that perspective, from a strategic insight as opposed to more of a tactical insight, which, to be frank, counterterrorism was more of a tactical thought piece, right? So those conversations are happening now. To be frank, I think a lot of the curriculums are changing. What's old again is new again, which is pretty interesting. So as you think about, we were in a briefing, and it was funny because we had Simon Sinek at one of our commanders' conferences and spoke to us, and he kind of coined the phrase Cold War 2.0. And what he really meant by that is how do you think about strategic deterrence, and how do you think about great power competition differently than what we've been doing in the past 25 years when it was really more about violent extremist organizations. So we're having those deep and thoughtful conversations, and to be frank, having relationships with folks like the Sam Nunn School at Georgia Tech to be able to continue to broaden our horizons on how we think about these.
Great, thank you, sir. We certainly are trying to do that. But on to another question here. This is from Nate Lee. What is the role of the Air Force Global Strike Command in securing energy resources and in the broader context of energy and international security, particularly since these complex modernized weapons systems are energy intensive and need secure energy resources in order to function?
Wow. Let me think about that question. It's part of our mission set anyway, right? So if it's, when we think about what are national interests, I don't know that I would categorize it down to what the weapon system itself takes. What I would categorize it is what is the intent of what I need to be able to provide for the COCOM commander on the mission set that he's trying to accomplish on behalf of the nation, right? So absolutely. So protection of vital resources, if that's in fact what the president says is something we need to do, then that becomes part of our calculus. I can honestly tell you that it wouldn't be because, wow, well, I got to kind of figure out how to power ICBM facilities in the northern tiers. So I got to figure out how to develop a mission that's going to make us be able to do that. I would raise that up a level to say, no, is there a threat? Are we receiving a threat to the power grid for the northern tier of the United States or the United States writ large, which then we would then receive guidance from our combatant commander that says, here's the mission sets that you need to kind of prepare for because it looks like there's a threat to our homeland. Those, or whether it's Strategic Command or whether it's Northern Command or you name it. I think that's how we would kind of get after, from Global Strike's perspective, that's how we would kind of get after that mission set. Not because of something that we would have to protect just because of our systems, right? It's more to it than that. It's more, we do that every single day at a tactical level, but strategically, that's not how we would go about that.
Great. Thank you, sir. Here's another one from Andrew Sherman. As older systems get phased out and replaced, what happens to unused nuclear fuel? How is it disposed of or recycled?
From our perspective, the NNSA, which is part of the Department of Energy, are the ones that would be responsible for any of that type of work to be done. So they would be, they're the experts on being able to kind of answer in detail, what happens to that. So from our perspective, in our stockpile, we monitor, what we have from our perspective. But when the reusable and all those type of things, that would, that's more of an answer for the Department of Energy rather than us, because they do that on our behalf.
Great. We have a new question here from Daryl Zay. Can you speak a bit about non-strategic nuclear weapons, the purpose of which is to keep Air Force Global Strike Command from joining the fight?
Okay, repeat that question. The joining the fight part is what I didn't understand at the end.
All right, I'll read the whole question for you again. Can you speak a bit about non-strategic nuclear weapons, the purpose of which is to keep the Air Force Global Strike Command from joining the fight?
So did you say non-strategic nuclear weapons?
Correct.
Okay, so you're talking short range nuclear weapons.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so right now in our inventory, we have strategic weapons. I think the conversation on keeping us out of the fight, so it's not necessarily, when we talk about deterrence can be conventional or nuclear. So from our perspective, we're in the fight because of the conventional aspects that we can bring as far as providing deterrence. So I think the way I would answer that question is we would be in the fight. We're in the fight today with our bomber forces from a conventional perspective. We're in a fight today with our ICBM forces from a deterrent perspective because they're on alert and pulling 24/7, 365 alerts currently. So I think I would answer it that way as opposed to, short range, long range, and those kind of things. We have a portfolio that is a conventional and nuclear portfolio within Air Force Global Strike Command that is available for command authorities to use.
Great, thank you. And in deference to your time, sir, we'll make this one the last question. This is from Zach Edix. What do you see happening to Taiwan and disputed territories in the South China Sea over the next 5 years?
I don't know. I think we'll have to see how that plays out. So I know there's a lot of conversations, and we tend to see a lot of things playing out there, but I think we'll have to sit back and watch and see what happens.
Okay, well, great. Thank you, sir. We would very much have preferred this to be a live, in-person audience where we could all give you the hearty round of applause that you deserve. But we can all clap in our offices or in our bedrooms or in our living rooms right now. And I hope that the audience can join me in saying thank you for joining us, sir. And thank you to the audience for joining us. Stay safe and be well.
Well, Chris, thank you so much. And Steve, thank you for hosting us here, albeit virtually. It's a great opportunity for us to really brag about what we do within Air Force Global Strike Command. And once again, the way I kind of phrased it earlier in my comments, I don't lose any sleep at night knowing the men and women that are part of this command and what they bring as far as what they bring in character and what they bring in might. You would be so proud. So hopefully whenever you see somebody that's wearing the Air Force Global Strike Command patch that might be there in Peachtree, get ready to go visit Georgia Tech, that talk maybe to the ROTC class, that you'd walk up to them and say, hey, we know exactly what you do in Global Strike Command and what you're doing for our nation. So I greatly appreciate the time that you gave me to be able to talk about what we do here in Global Strike Command. And thank you so much.
It's very much our
Thank you
pleasure.
again, General Cotton and Chris. Thank you very much for helping to coordinate and moderate the questions. And lastly, thank you for all of our participants today.
Thank you.
Everybody.